That coin you see in the thumbnail, it isn't a currency, it's a tracking device. While you were scrolling through memes and preoccupied with the latest developments from the commissions happening around the country, a consortium of some of the most powerful finance and tech companies in South Africa, Sanlam, Luno, and Standard Bank, quietly launched a new digital token called the ZAR Universal, or ZARU for short. The consortium of companies leading this digital currency migration calls it modernizing the economy. However, what they didn't include in their fancy PowerPoint presentations is this: it marks the beginning of the end for the anonymity of your wallet. Over the next few minutes, we're going down a digital currency rabbit hole. We're going to discuss the ZARU as well as the South African Reserve Bank's project Khokha. Together they're building a digital cage. And the bars are made of private tax, state surveillance, and a ticking debt bomb you've probably never heard about. We'll also take a closer look at Brazil's popular disruptive zero-fee payment system called Pix, comparing it to the struggling instant payment digital transaction system of South Africa's PayShap. So, before we get into all of that, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Now let's start with the ticking debt bomb. Money works because we trust it. For 100 years, the South African rand was a physical, tangible object, a banknote you could hold, fold, hide under a mattress, or hand to someone without anyone else knowing. That trust came from the fact that you, as the currency holder, could decide where to save, spend, or invest your cash. You were the steward of your money. But the introduction of the ZARU changes that, and the change isn't in your favor. In fact, the ZARU fundamentally changes your relationship with your money. It is important to note, though, that the ZARU is currently only available to qualified institutional investors through Easy Equities, with a phased retail rollout planned for the near future. First, let me explain what a digital currency or stablecoin is, because most people have no idea what it is. In simple terms, a stablecoin is a digital representation of money designed to always be worth exactly one real rand. So for every ZARU token out there, an entity such as a company promises to keep one actual rand in a bank account. In theory, you can always swap your digital ZARU rands back for physical cash. Sounds harmless, right? Here's where the trick begins. Those real rands aren't just sitting in a bank vault. Sanlam, the same company that sells you life insurance and other finance products, takes your money and invests your money. Specifically, they buy South African government bonds. A government bond, in simple terms, is just an IOU from the state. You lend the government money, and they promise to pay you back with interest. So Sanlam takes your rands, buys bonds, and Sanlam earns interest. A government bond in South Africa is a low-risk, fixed-interest debt security issued by the National Treasury to fund national projects like infrastructure, education, and healthcare. But here's the catch. When you hold the ZARU digital coin, you don't get that interest, Sanlam does. In this setup, you are giving Sanlam an interest-free loan so they can profit from your savings. Analysts call this the private tax, money taken from you without you ever seeing it. Now let's look at the numbers. South Africa's debt to GDP ratio, that's how much the government owes compared to the size of the economy, is peaking at almost 79% this fiscal year. That's the highest in 17 years. The National Treasury admits we borrow over 1.5 billion rand every single day just to keep the lights on. Think about what that means. If the government faces a debt crisis, which is a real risk right now, the bonds backing your ZARU could collapse in value. Now imagine a digital bank run. Thousands of people try to cash out their ZARU at the same time, but the stablecoin issuer can't sell the devalued bonds fast enough. In an extreme scenario, what crypto people would call a Terra Luna style crash, your digital savings could become worthless in a matter of hours. During times of volatility and uncertainty in cryptocurrency markets, events such as stablecoin depegs can happen. This is an event where the market price of a stablecoin, which is designed to be pegged one-to-one to a base currency, like the rand, deviates significantly from the 1 rand value, meaning it is worth less or more than its intended collateral asset. While minor fluctuations are normal due to liquidity gaps, a depeg, particularly a significant drop, often triggers panic, as stablecoins are used as safe havens and base pairs for trading and decentralized finance. Meanwhile, the institutions at the very top have already hedged their bets because they may have insider information prior to depegging events. That's the first layer of the trap. So who are the big players behind this digital currency drive? First, Sanlam. They manage the reserves. Second, Standard Bank. They hold the actual rands. Third, Luno and Easy Equities. They let you buy and sell ZARU on their fintech platforms. And finally, Lesaka Technologies, formerly known as Net1, which is a payments company that connects the formal economy to the informal one, especially through their role of facilitating social grant recipient payments on behalf of the government. Here's the financial reality. As of April this year, the interest rate on 10-year South African government bonds is around 8.4%. That means, for every 1 billion rand parked in ZARU reserves, the consortium of companies behind the ZARU digital rand earns roughly 84 million rand every year in passive income. And you, the token holder, earn exactly 0 rands. Globally, the stablecoin market is now worth over $300 billion. In 2025 alone, more than $30 trillion worth of stablecoin transactions were processed. The big institutions, such as the local consortium we're discussing, aren't stupid. They know digital money is the next financial domain of innovation, and they're already positioning themselves to be the ones collecting the fees from each and every transaction. But the most disturbing part of the ownership group behind this digital finance drive is the role of Lesaka Technologies. They serve more than 1.7 million social grant recipients through a platform called Easy Pay Everywhere. By pushing the most vulnerable people onto these digital rails, Lesaka gains a complete picture of government social grant recipients' spending habits. Every purchase, every airtime voucher, every loaf of bread, they see it all. Lesaka can then use the data of the social grant recipients to sell them interest-driven microloans and insurance to people who can least afford them, usually under the guise of financial inclusion and innovation, or even banking the unbanked. That's the poverty premium, a toll road for the poor to access their own money. And because the digital rand is being built as a closed system, these private gatekeepers have enormous power to set prices, restrict access, and profit from every transaction. Now let's talk about the state's own digital project. The South African Reserve Bank has been quietly building its own digital coin. They call it Project Khokha. Back in 2018, Phase 1 of the project proved that a blockchain could settle the entire interbank payment system, about 70,000 transactions a day, in less than 2 hours. So imagine a digital notebook where every page is numbered, and once you write something on a page, you can't erase it, and copies of that notebook are kept by hundreds of people at the same time. If anyone tries to change an old page, everyone else's copies will show the original. That's a blockchain. That was an important milestone to accomplish for the Reserve Bank. Then came Phase 2 of Project Khokha in 2022. The Reserve Bank actually issued a real bond on a blockchain platform. They tested 2 forms of digital money. a wholesale central bank digital currency and a tokenized deposit issued by commercial banks. But here's the part they didn't advertise: full visibility for the central bank. The system uses clever cryptography to keep transaction amounts private between banks, so Bank A can pay Bank B without the public knowing how much. However, not from the state. No privacy at all. The Reserve Bank can see every single transaction that moves across the network. So why does that matter? You may be asking. Because that architecture enables what experts call programmable money. Imagine a digital rand that comes with rules written into the code. So that could mean that social grants can only be spent on approved goods, certain food brands or specific shops. It could be programmed money that expires if you don't use it within a month, forcing you to spend or lose value, or the ability to freeze a person's entire digital wallet with a single government order without a court date. In March this year, economist Davy Root warned that central bank digital currencies could become tools of authoritarian control. He said governments could restrict purchases, seize funds, or manipulate spending behavior overnight. Now, to be fair, the Reserve Bank has said publicly that it has deprioritized a retail digital rand, the kind everyday people would use, for now. They say they're focusing on wholesale uses and strengthening existing payment systems. But the infrastructure is already built. Project Khokha 2X is currently exploring commercial bank-issued stablecoins for regional payments. Once the digital rails are in place, flipping the switch to a full surveillance currency is a political decision, not a technical one. And history shows that once the state has a tool, the state tends to use it. Now let's zoom out and take note that there's another silent threat developing, one that doesn't come from the Reserve Bank or the major local banks. It comes from the US dollar. Globally, more than 99% of all stablecoins are pegged to the American dollar. The two biggest stablecoin issuers are called USDT and USDC. Tether Limited, often referred to as Tether, is the company that issues USDT, the world's largest stablecoin. Founded in 2014, it is a subsidiary of iFinex Inc., which also owns the cryptocurrency exchange Bitfinex. They are backed by hundreds of billions of dollars worth of US government debt. Circle, formerly Circle Internet Financial, is the primary issuer of USDC, the second largest stablecoin by market capitalization. It's a regulated, full-stack financial technology firm founded in 2013. Circle manages USDC reserves, backed by US Treasury securities and cash. So that means every time a South African buys USDT, that money leaves the country. It gets converted into a digital dollar and parked in American bonds. That's capital flight in digital form. According to Chainalysis, a blockchain data firm, stablecoins now account for nearly half of all cryptocurrency transaction volume in sub-Saharan Africa. Why? Because dollar-backed stablecoins offer a hedge against rand volatility. When the rand weakens, which it often does, holding a digital dollar protects your purchasing power. But here's the danger. If this trend continues, South Africans might start using digital dollars for everyday local trade, buying groceries, paying rent, settling bills, all in a currency that the South African Reserve Bank cannot control. That's called de facto dollarization, and once it happens, the Reserve Bank loses its ability to set interest rates, control inflation, or manage the domestic money supply. Your country's monetary policy would effectively be outsourced to the US Federal Reserve. This is why the ZARU stablecoin is a defensive play. The consortium and Reserve Bank need you to use a digital rand instead of a digital dollar. They want to keep demand for rand-based assets inside South Africa. But here's the brutal truth. If the ZARU stablecoin fails to gain trust or liquidity, if people don't believe it's truly safe, then dollarization will accelerate, and the Reserve Bank will become a powerless observer in its own economy. However, there is an alternative being explored, the BRICS Bridge. That's a blockchain-based payment system being built by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. By mid-2025, pilot testing was already underway between China, Russia, and India, with South Africa and Egypt joining later. The goal is to process up to 20,000 transactions per second in local currencies, bypassing the US dollar entirely. If successful, it could protect South Africa from Western financial pressure and make trading with neighbors like Namibia and Botswana much cheaper. But it's still a long way off, and for now, the dollar remains the king of global finance. Breaking the global dollar dominance will take time and a concerted effort. Recent geopolitical events indicate that a shift away from the dollar is underway. Let's bring this home to relate to every person with a bank account, because there's something that affects our daily digital banking transactions directly, regardless of social or economic standing, and that's the cost of sending money. You might have heard of PayShap, South Africa's instant payment system. It's a digital transaction system launched in March 2023. The idea was simple. Let anyone with a bank account or phone number send money instantly, any time of day or night. In theory, this should be a game changer for financial inclusion and fairness. But the reality has been disappointing. By August 2025, PayShap had processed about 460 million transactions, worth 403 billion rand. That might sound like a big number, until you compare it to Brazil. Brazil launched a system called Pix in 2020. Within a few years, 84% of online consumers were using it. In 2025 alone, Pix processed over 370 billion transactions, moving more than 4 trillion Brazilian reals, roughly 770 billion US dollars. So why is PayShap so far behind? One word: fees. In Brazil, peer-to-peer transfers on Pix are free by law. The central bank made zero-cost transactions mandatory for individuals, and every major bank is required to participate. Currently in South Africa, participation is optional, and the banks have turned PayShap into a for-profit money machine. Data from June 2025 shows that the most common PayShap fee at Absa is 7.50 Rand. At Nedbank, it's 10 Rand. At Standard Bank, it's 7 Rand. Some banks have quietly set PayShap as the default payment option, even when a cheaper electronic transfer is available. Think about what that means for someone living in a township or a rural area, earning a low income or solely relying on government social grants for survival. A 10 Rand fee on a 100 Rand transaction is a 10% tax just for moving your own money. That's not inclusion, that's exploitation of the highest order. So, until the South African government follows Brazil's example and mandates zero-cost peer-to-peer transfers, PayShap will remain a digital value transfer option for higher earners, not the vast majority. And furthermore, the digital rand will be a toll road, not a public highway, especially for the financially marginalized. So where does all of this leave us? We are standing at a fork in the road with two possible futures to contend with. Future 1, the dystopian route. In this scenario, the Reserve Bank flips the switch on a retail digital currency. Every transaction you make is recorded forever. The state can see everything, not just criminals, but every documented citizen. Programmable spending becomes real. Social grants are restricted to approved goods. Money expires, If you don't use it within a set time limit of days or weeks, the assets of those who do not comply are frozen with a click of a button. Informal traders who rely on cash because they don't have bank accounts or because they trust physical money more than digital are effectively criminalized. Their customers can't pay them because digital transactions are now the only option. Meanwhile, the cartel, consortium of Sanlam, Standard Bank, and Lesaka collects billions in private tax. The poor pay the poverty premium at every turn. And when the next debt shock hits, which is a real risk, the government can lock your digital rands to prevent capital flight. Your savings become a hostage. That's the nightmare. Future 2, the empowerment route. South Africa adopts the Brazilian PIX model. The government mandates zero-cost, open digital payments for everyone. Any registered provider, not just the big banks, can offer digital rand services. Informal traders can accept digital payments without paying excessive fees. Over time, their transaction history builds a digital credit profile, giving them access to small business loans, insurance, and savings products that have historically been denied to the unbanked. Stablecoin reserves are audited monthly by independent firms. No hidden yield is extracted, no private tax. The interest earned on reserves is either returned to token holders or used to fund public digital infrastructure, like free data for transactions or subsidized electricity for township and rural communities. The state uses blockchain transparency to eliminate the billions of rand lost to corruption in social grant distribution. Every rand sent by the government can be tracked from treasury to recipient, with no middlemen skimming off the top. Imagine a South Africa where every single rand, from the national treasury's balance down to the last municipal worker's salary, lives on a public blockchain, not hidden in spreadsheets, not locked in opaque departmental budgets, but visible in real time to every citizen with an internet connection. Every government tender is bid on an open ledger. Every payment to a supplier, every grant disbursed to a school, every salary paid to a state employee, traceable, permanent, and auditable by anyone with an internet connection. That's not science fiction. That's the same technology the Reserve Bank has already tested in Project Khokha. The capacity exists today. The only thing missing is the political will to turn the surveillance state inside out and use the very same digital rails to hold public officials accountable instead of spying on citizens. So, at the end of the day, which future becomes a reality? Well, that depends entirely on governance, on the laws, regulations, and public pressure that shapes how our digital money is built. Oh, and by the way, here's another important fact. In October 2025, South Africa was officially removed from the Financial Action Task Force grey list, the global anti-money laundering and terrorist financing watchdog. The country addressed and fixed all 22 problem areas identified by the task force. That means the excuse of fighting money laundering and terrorism, which governments around the world have used to justify mass financial surveillance, is now much weaker. We have proven that we can meet international standards without turning every citizen's wallet into an open book. The question then becomes, will we use that regulatory clarity to build a free, open, and inclusive digital economy? Or will we slide quietly into an authoritarian surveillance state? The technology of digital money is neutral. A blockchain is, after all, just a database at its core. A central bank, digital currency is just software. So the issue isn't the technology or the migration from a physical form of currency to a digital currency. It's the intentions and self-interests of the people driving the migration onto digital currency rails. You've heard the term stablecoin. Digital money designed to always be worth 1 rand or $1. But here's an uncomfortable truth to contend with. Stablecoins are only as stable as the trust behind them. And trust can evaporate in a matter of hours. Ask your crypto-curious friend if they remember the Terra Luna project. In 2022, its UST stablecoin collapsed despite being backed by Bitcoin, arguably the most fundamentally sound digital asset in existence. Bitcoin is the very basis of digital sovereignty. No central issuer, no single point of control. Yet even that couldn't save UST from a death spiral. Billions vanished overnight. That was an extreme case, but it proves a point. There is no such thing as a risk-free digital currency. USDT and USDC, the $2-pegged stablecoin giants, have never fully depegged. But they are backed by US Treasury bills and commercial paper. What happens if the American debt market sneezes, or if a run on redemptions forces them to sell assets into a falling market? The mechanics are the same as what we described with ZARU and South African bonds. At the end of the day, the migration of currency and value from physical form, notes you can hold, coins you can jingle, to purely digital value is still a nascent experiment. We are barely 15 years into this journey. The rails are still new. The rules are being written in real time. And every actor in this new financial paradigm, the central banks, the private consortiums, the stablecoin issuers, the crypto exchanges, they all have a self-interest in the outcome of this experiment. Sanlam wants your reserves to earn yield for them. The Reserve Bank wants full visibility. Lesaka wants your data. None of them are neutral observers. So where does that leave you? It leaves you where you've always been, responsible for your own sovereignty. Do your own research, read the white papers, subscribe to this channel to keep up with finance and money-related topics. Understand what assets are backing the digital tokens you hold. Ask who profits when you transact, and then position yourself accordingly. Not with fear, not with paranoia, but with eyes wide open. We need to contend with the thought that the digital rand is going to be a reality. Now, whether it becomes a tool of freedom or a cage of surveillance depends on the choices we make right now, as citizens, as consumers, and as individuals who still value privacy and self-ownership. Forewarned is forearmed. See you in the next one.